So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for coming. I know that at the end of the second day of Republica, it's very hard to maintain your attention, so thank you for being the strong ones and joining me. I would like to start with a trigger warning. My topic is about posthumous data, and I will be talking about death too. So that's your opportunity to prepare yourself, or you can also leave. And yeah, I will begin with a question of if you have thought before what will happen to your data after you die. You can raise your hands if you thought about this. Nice. And then another question, then the subsequent question is if you have did some preparations, have you set a Facebook? So that there alternate, like you can set up on Facebook requirements. How would you like your memorial to be, for instance? So there are some options, but they're of course limited. That's why we have this issue that I'll present you today. And I will ease in with the cultural representations of posthumous data. We have Black Mirror episode from quite a while ago, and then the scene set in the context of a couple, and then one of the partner dies. And what happens after is that one of the partners chooses to bring the data into and recreate them as a clone, basically. And how it was inspired, this episode was from two questions. The first question was, what do we do if a person dies? Do we delete their contact details? What do we do? So basically that was the first question that creators had to themselves. And then the second one, what would happen with Twitter data if someone, if we have a bot or something? So we didn't have to wait too long, and less than a decade after, it's already an issue. And someone chose to put their data in of their partner and to chat with them. And this was an excerpt of them interacting, and basically, partner passed away, and they uploaded into, it's GDP free, and it costed at that time when the person did it, it costed $5. Now you can do it for 10, and get the chat going with a recreation of someone's data. And it's not limited only to text messages. Then we also have bullet points of the issues that I want to talk about. So immediately the first issue is consent. Did Jessica, in this case, consent for her data to be used, to be recreated? The second one, how it impacts the grieving practices of Joshua. How it changes and what is his well-being. Is it worse or better because he has this chance to chat with imitation of her? And then the third one, it's more, we're getting darker and darker bit by bit, is the question, what happens if hallucinations happen? If we know, if with a text recommendation systems, if the text creation is, you're predicting words, what would happen after? So basically, we have a case of what happens if it goes very far away from the person that you imagine, or the prompt engineering and prompt hacking. What if you chat to the point when it breaks and then starts talking things that the person that you know, you would never think that they would say that. And it's not limited only to the speech, it's also virtual reality. So as technology progresses, we'll have more and more users that are bringing the questions, what do we do with this posthumous data? So in this case, it was a couple getting married, and the bride's father passed away, so then they brought his avatar to a wedding, and he was guest of honor. So this sets up the entire marketplace of different possibilities and goods that are services that are sold. And if you're in digital, you might know Florida and Ompman, and they classified them different services. So the first one is information management services. They're pretty obvious. So what do you do? Where the data? So social media account management. You distribute basically intermediary for management of the posthumous data after one dies. Then we are coming to the generation of the new content. So basically, you upload the data that's there, and then you generate different sorts of content. So it can be text, visual, audio, whatever, and then upcoming ones that will be. So we are getting into more question, like practices that we can discuss. And then we also have memorial services and community grieving places and recreational services. So we are coming to transhumanism of someone thinking that they can extend their life and then have their thoughts staying up and representing them in some way. So that's a bit of a different interpretation that's basically more on the side of humans themselves. And then, so do we have some protections? Is it regulated? Is it governed? And the question is that in Europe, so it's Eurocentric approach, in Europe, no. GDPR is only for the living subject. And yeah, basically after one's passing, GDPR does not apply. So all of the protections that one enjoys because of GDPR are gone. And then, so what it means that the data that is out there, it's good. Like it's good for the companies, platforms to continue producing data, generating data and generating value, which is the interesting thing. If you look at the posthumous data as a economical value, so what happens in the environments of wills, someone can write wills like, oh, I have this property, this distributed. And here, there's a value that is just basically continues living without the consent. The consent is given in the terms of agreements, but there's no choice of getting out of the algorithm. So the cases that were there, so generating data based on interactions with the living people. So basically in messaging and Facebook, there was a case when they could see that the individuals were tracked, the ones grieving, and how they interact. And then based on that, they got particular ads served to them. So that's a bit, especially in the vulnerable stages of someone grieving, that was done already. And then we have this entire marketplace of new products. And we also have question of training. So even right now in chat, in ChatGPT, we have all of the data that was taken away scrapped from the internet. The algorithms were built and trained, so maybe someone's, like in a way, everyone contributes to it. And then the people that passed away too, in a way. It's like a Friends episode, and if someone watches Friends and then there's a laughter, most of the people already passed away. So it's similar with algorithms, like the idea of what happens with the algorithm trained. But currently there are some progress is done in computer science in the subfield of how do you extract a subset of the data from the algorithm if you don't want it to be trained on it. So it's a field in progress. And then where the protections exist, it's usually from the reputation approach and dignity and then image. So the question of how one is represented in their, how their images of them are used in public spaces or alike. So the cases usually at court that take place are based on defamation suits. So there are some cases in Switzerland already. And where the protections are, I will maybe talk about this later, but the protections are also there in the medical field. And that's the field that has the most advanced ones. And then we come to the question of, is the economical approach good enough? And I'm coming to the point that it's not. And because of the current surveillance capitalism is above us, there's no way to get out from because you already signed the terms of agreement, your data is in, one passed away, it's there, and it's trained, so it continues on living, and you don't have any say in how it goes. And then interestingly, according to GDPR, the companies have to depersonalize the data and anonymize them. And interestingly, because I will come to the proposed mechanism of what to do about it, interestingly, in the forensic science and archaeology or just grieving practices of human remains, like of physical bodies, is the fact that the idea that you would like to identify the person. That restores their dignity and their respect to them. So basically, if the person is depersonified, they do not have their the respect is not there. And then, of course, the question of plurality, like Facebook has a mourning, you can set someone, like delete the account, you can have a memoriam for them. if someone chooses. So basically in those cases, Facebook determines how the grieving takes place. There's not that much you can do. Like you have the options and they're the ones that you can choose, and that's all. And there's no variation then. Of course, there are cultures and like subcultures that like have some practices, but like on Twitter, for instance, how people grieve. But this is not not the case because of the network effects and big platforms. And then, so what can we do about this? And then we were very straightforward about this because, this is work in progress, by the way, I forgot to mention. So we are working on the paper together with Martyna Kalvaityte. He's in France and postdoc in their atomic agency and working on ethics and AI. So then we were inspired, so basically my co-author did this up, and with the question of what happens to remains of physical human beings, like of physical bodies. So we took off from archaeological principles of treating the data. And how they came to being is in Australia, there are complex indigenous communities, and then in between the local governments, and then basically they had to fight for their communities to stay there, like for their members of the communities, their bodies, posthumous bodies, to stay there and not to be put in some museum or something. So basically it was a fight. The principles of cultural sensitivity comes from actually tension. So we come to the guidelines. So as I said, we were very straightforward because like, posthumous data, human remains, people have practices. So what can we do about this also in digital sphere? So we have, we have respect for mortal remains. So we just transform it into posthumous data that no matter the background, ethnicity, anything, everyone deserves respect for their posthumous data. Then we come for respect for the vicious, and the same for, we come to the idea that the individuals have a right to choose how their data should be processed. So like in wills, we have how one should be mourned, like or grieved, celebrated, how the memorial takes place. Usually sometimes people have this written down in their wills. So also the same goes here. We have respect for the vicious. If someone, for instance, agrees that the data is put into a chatbot, basically, or used in any other context. They can also, if we go further in this scenario, then if they agree for the data to be used to be recreated in some context, then the question is to what scope? Because now there are some practices they can expand even further later on. So the idea of consent, that one chooses the limits of how the data is used. And then the third one, this is more about the fact that the local practices might be different, and they are different. The grieving methods differ. The times that one is like the cultural practices is there, so they are also different. And right now with network effects and big platforms, we don't have that choice. I mean, you can delete your data before, but I mean, take it. I don't know if you tried, but it's hard to navigate. And if you have the data, that's why also there are so many services already offered for this. But basically, in this case, to be able to allow for different cultural practices too. So to have this conversation started. And then the question begins also for the historical approach. What do we do with data? Because that data also has different values for society, for research, for history research, so that also has to be put into perspective, and also medical research, where there's so much data already there about someone's disease or whatever. In that case, it also has value. So also this is to be allowed all in negotiation or in agreement with also the one having a choice to choose as the third. As one of the principles before. And then the fifth and sixth was because in the archaeological community it was coming from the tension point, this Vermilion Accord. It comes from out of the tension. So here too it says that the differences have to be acknowledged, recognized, and that the negotiation practices should be in place. Right now, it looks very utopic because what we can do, go to Facebook and be like, oh, I want my data to be different. And it just doesn't work this way. So we can express our wishes, but it's not there. But generally, our suggestion is that to also account for the negotiations or to take place. So that's basically the guidelines themselves. But then the question is, like, to what extent it's feasible. It's pretty, like, I'm going to that, it's pretty challenging already. But it's only possible as a long term. We couldn't do it like that in a very quick moment. So it requires some sort of a preparations. And also, as long as we don't have any control over data, there's not that much we can do. Like, you can delete it, you can take it, but it's still going to be, like in the Facebook case, you can download it, you can delete it, but if you download it and it stays, like, it's still there. So it's not that much you can do about it. So we have to have more control. That's the hardship. And I think I think in the Data Governance Act, now it's currently in trialogues in the Commission, so maybe it talks about altruism, so it maybe goes into the direction of the nations, but it's not about the grieving or the one's personal aspects of data use, but it's also somewhere in the direction of having more control. So maybe when we go as a society to a place where we have more ownership and there are marketplaces for data, so it's not just that the data is used, but in the cases where data, we have more control of it, that's where the change could begin. And where the cost would come, it would go on data processors, so basically the platforms, which is also challenging and also very important, because in historical contexts, platforms come and go, even if some of them look so monstrous and hard to live without, but some of them fall. And so, or like Twitter, for instance, it's coming back a bit further from the place where the stability is ensured. So what happens to platforms where the platform basically falls? So that's why the cost would also be there associated in this process, and that burden of research and proof has to be given, so that it has to be established. So it's not like someone wants, oh, I'll consume, like I'll take the data and I'll take as much and extract as much of value. So it's not the case. You have to prove that there's scientific research value, educational value in all of this. So to have the control for one's data. And then another point is the inequalities. That right now, if someone can take action and agency in terms of how their data is processed, but it also means some level of consciousness. So you would prepare for one's passing, so your own passing. So it means some level of also mental space that you would think about this and like engage with it, take the steps needed to assign someone, for instance, to be guardian of your data on Facebook, for instance. So it takes some mental space and skill, and digital skill also, to be conscious about those issues. I mean, also abstraction of data is also an option. So you just delete it, destroy it, try to mix it up. So, but that also, again, requires skill, time, resources. And going into that inequality side, is the question of the data. Where is the data in the next 50 years? Like, global majority is global majority. That's where the data will be. That's why I think it's also very important that it wouldn't be like Commission deciding on something and then it just becoming a global practice. It's also Brussels effect is great too in some cases. But here, as it's a bit small, but then we see that there are different scenarios for how the data would look like, but basically that, as you can see, yeah, Europe is a bit bright. There's not that many profiles compared to other regions that will just be because of how many people there live. So basically the issue is that you would want to somehow acknowledge the diversity of cultures and practices into here too. And so yeah, that's basically the opening for the end. And this is me on LinkedIn and my author that couldn't be here today. So that's basically the future of posthumous data. And we still have 10 minutes. So if someone has questions, remarks, maybe you have some thoughts of like how it should be, very welcome.
Thanks a lot. So I was reflecting, of course, a lot of this is very, I guess, kind of theoretical thinking, but you briefly mentioned consent when you were comparing the two kind of frameworks for data and for archaeological remains. So I don't know, I was just curious to know kind of what was your perspective on, like whether the dead can consent, because technically I guess you consented alive, but then is that still valid when you die? Again, all of this is just, I guess more of a philosophical approach, but I don't know if you've thought about it.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, I mean, currently there's no consent given in any ways. So now we have people passing and then someone having their data or their chats and then uploading them on. And then that's basically the contention point that created this entire problematization that we explored, is that now because of the consent, the practices that are given are questionable if someone would be okay or if that's their will and intent. And now bringing back to the human remains and general remains and like wishes for after one's passing, is that one can express how they want to be, what should be done with them, or how their belongings should be distributed. And all of these questions are basically already a cultural practice that one can prepare for their own passing and distribute all these questions. So basically then the consent of that person would be the one deciding factor for the future. And then there was another point. But that basically the consent would determine the future uses or prohibit the others. And in legal community, in legal community it's also a question if that people have rights. It's like a debate, like what do we do? But then the assumption is that they give the consent till they can, and that is to stay. As it is with human remains generally. Like no one's talking about how mental health is changing or something, like it's just assumed till the point that it's accepted.
Thank you very much. I was very surprised by the fact that GDPR ends at death, actually. I wouldn't have assumed that. And I wanted to know if you know why that is, if this is an accidental gap of regulation or if it's intentional.
That's a very good choice. I think it maybe, I don't know the reason, the thinking that came to GDPR, but I could guess is basically the legal body is not there anymore. Like legal personhood is not there anymore. So I think that's why it was not. Maybe I'm just guessing that maybe it goes to the more conservative thought of what is a legal personhood and like a subject. So maybe that's why it's not there. We are property of corporations and platforms.
Also, still on that, I just wanted to know if there are any countries that actually regulate posthumous data.
The best example is medical data. This is the field that is most advanced in thinking, and it's not only for the person that passes, but also for their family, which I think is important to, because like no one, like why the reason why someone passed is their families think. It can be medical conditions or something that are influenced, or I don't know, it's also for data processing, insurance, that kind of stuff. So in the UK there's also a big, in the US I'm familiar with too, that even in some cases that different, the extent, the length to which data is saved, it differs. So I think it's 50, 70 years for the medical records, because they're one of the most sensitive data available. So that's why I think that is very much more advanced in this field of data management. And there's also in the UK, I think, this is the case of data donations and medical data donations. So one can contribute to science. It's like as one can contribute with their body, basically sign that they will donate their body parts if something happens, and then if they're usable. So it's the same with data, like, okay, use my data for research. So I think we can also build on that, like take from their practices of just generally like consent to, again, consent.
Are there more questions? We have still 5 minutes. Use your chance.
Hi. It's not so much of a question, more of a complimentary statement. So it's been a very long process. In the past couple of years, my mother passed away, and then it triggered a whole process of almost doing like an inventory, and then I landed into this rising number of formats for directives for digital asset consent. So I found in which you can fill out and then sign up, to leave someone the right to what to do. And the thing, so here comes the question, is because in these directives that you can sign for a legal representative in case of, that you are in an unconscious or coma situation or incapacitated or passed away, there is no differentiation between the online data or digital assets. For example, digital documents, or if you have USB, laptop information, accounts that are not necessarily connected to the internet, so to speak. Is there anything about this, on that difference between one thing is to have a Facebook account or to have the medical data that is online, but the other one is you own digital documents that potentially could go online? But is there a difference about this? And the second question, quasi-comment, is that there is this, you mentioned about the cultural thing. There in Sweden, I think, is that they do this death cleaning, which is that you look through your items together with the family and you do this cleanup in preparation before. So it's making you think about your passing and what to do with everything. So that's one of the things that I found in this stockpiling and making me reflect about, okay, the clothes and all those things, but also like digital accounts, doing inventories and finding out what exactly do I have and own, and it's online there. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'm sorry about your loss. Thank you for the reference about Sweden. That's very interesting, and that's again like maybe a more social good-based economies and societies where you put effort into planning and then putting it as a practice. So then different the people are made to think about this. So I think it's great. The issue, basically, we talked more about and thought about more about digital data and digital in general archives. I mean, now we assume that most of the things are digital, the cloud somewhere there, somewhere out there. And in this case is that we did not distinguish between. This model would still work because you can still choose, like as inventory, someone's doing it. Oh, this USB stick goes there. Does that that still would go in the choice aspect. But then where we found a contention, but it was more online. But basically, the issue with the data that's already even if someone would sign up for giving away the data, the issue is when something is password protected. And then the most legal cases that came into this discussion were legal cases in the US, many cases, I think, and maybe Switzerland too, of how I think it was basically Yahoo that was the mailing old school platform of someone logging in and then someone passing and then wanting to access it. So that was the starting point for basically the discussion on what do you do with this. So if it's password protected, basically it's almost impossible to get access to the account actually after one's passing. So that's why there's in the US too those fiduciaries where you can put someone in the charge of aligning everything for after one's passing. Is the case for preparation. It's also basically a business of someone preparing also in digital too. So that's more our economy.
Thank you so much, Martyna Kalvaityte. Please give a big round of applause. We have to finish.
Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you.